We are going to dive into the fun side of translation this week with this latest episode of Strange New Worlds. But I just want everyone to know, I hope you're doing okay. I know there's been all sorts of kerfluffle and everything going on over the last while. I hope you're looking after yourselves, and I hope you're treating yourself with the kindness you should be. Now, let's get into it. Episode 6 of the second season of Strange New Worlds is called Lost in Translation, and quite fittingly, we are following Celia Rose Gooding's Uhura for the whole episode. I really like Celia's take on Uhura. Of course, when we think of Uhura, I still think of Nichelle Nichols, as I think we all will for quite some time to come. But also, let's not forget the wonderful Zoe Saldana's take on her as well. What we see with Celia Rose Gooding's Uhura, and you really get this in this episode, is just how young this version of the character is. And she says it's at one point in dialogue that she's only 22 years old. And a lot of the times when you have a Starfleet officer as your viewpoint character, I find it very easy to forget how young they can be, because with the formality of training, there is a lot of maturity and experience that goes into that. I think that this week we get to see, surrounded by all of these officers who are not as emotionally involved in the plot as Uhura is, I think we get to see a fantastic balance of that. To get the ball rolling, like, Uhura is definitely my first up of the week, and this is something I'm going to revisit throughout this episode as well. When I tell you we've got some stuff for the cetacean observations, now you make sure you stick around, because this was a good week for some deep cut Easter eggs as well. Now let's set the story, shall we? The Enterprise is arriving at the Bannon Nebula. Stick around for cetacean observations. Pike has been promoted to fleet captain, which is a bit cool. Now, we know from the past that Pike, of course, reaches the rank of fleet captain. So does this mean, well, not quite, not this week, no. But it is cool seeing that new insignia on his chest. He's there in charge of both the Enterprise and the Farragut. Where have we seen that before? As they work to get the deuterium refinery up and running in this deuterium-filled nebula. There is a few little hints that all is not well aboard the refinery, because it was meant to open up months ago and keeps getting delayed for various reasons, which I'm sure we'll never discuss again in the running of this episode. Did you hear the clang of that plot point being dropped there? And I think it was done really well. I really liked it. While en route there, we're learning all of this via Uhura's log. Ensign's log, always fun. Where do we hear that a lot? Lower decks, that's where we hear that a lot. And Uhura is recalling some of the training that she did with Hemmer. We do get Hemmer back in this episode. Of course, we lost him last season, and I'm still not okay with it, but we did know that Bruce Horak would be returning for this season. So we get recordings where Hemmer was showing Uhura how to recalibrate a communication system that runs through the nacelle of the Enterprise. She jokes to Pelia, who comes in and says kind of, what the hell are you doing in my nacelle room? She had annoyed Hemmer sufficiently by asking him to do this job that he said, look, I'm just going to show you how to do it yourself. And they did, and it's a lovely moment between the two via the recording, that we see again just how close they had become as friends before his untimely encounter with the Xenomorph, Gorn. There's actually a lovely moment as well where Pelia is very honest with Uhura, and she says, yes, I remember Hemmer, he was in my class, he was an exceptional student. And then she goes, actually, I just said that because he was dead, he was an okay student. I'm giving that an up, not because she insulted Hemmer. The point is, when we lose people, we tend to romanticize them. And that's perfectly normal, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes, going the opposite and just being honest about what they were and who they were can be as comforting as only seeing the roses. So it was a really nice moment where Pelia was able to really connect with Uhura. It was very short. It's not like they went for dinner or anything, but it was enough for Uhura to know that, yeah, okay, Pelia gets me. That was just a really special moment, I think, in this episode that really stands out. And we haven't even hit the opening credits yet. Uhura leaves the room after hearing a somewhat strange noise that sort of reminds me of the, well, I guess those bombs from Star Wars Attack of the Clones, or the blaster beam itself from Star Trek The Motion Picture. It's quite a distinct noise. And she enters the turbo lift and she turns around to see frickin' zombie Hemmer standing in front of her. Take an up! Oh, that was terrifying. Sorry, that one really got me. And it was really well realized. And, you know, kind of another kind of kick in the face to those of us who aren't ready to lose Hemmer. So, yeah, between the recordings and zombie Hemmer. However, now this, I guess it's going to do a spoiler here, but if you've seen the episode, you're with me. My down of the episode is that, with the exception of one scene at the end where a slightly healthier looking Hemmer smiles at Uhura and vanishes, that's it. That's all the Hemmer we get. It left me feeling unsatisfied. Because, again, this tease of, you know, Bruce Horak is not done with Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and, you know, we may see them again. And then, if this is it now, I'll be a bit like, oh, because if you take, for example, those recordings where Hemmer is showing Uhura how to use the system, how to recalibrate it, and there's a nice bit of banter, and Hemmer says, can't be so gullible, and one of the points that Hemmer teaches Uhura ends up actually saving the day at the end, spoiler. I think they could have maybe even done a whole flashback scene. Obviously they brought Bruce back and put him in face paint and makeup and everything, so he was there. I think they could have done that as a flashback scene, an entire scene all to itself, instead of we get seconds of Hemmer. So yeah, that to me was a bit of a, just felt like, oh, okay, that's it then? Right. I can imagine myself now going, he's downing the fact that Hemmer was there, but there wasn't. Don't take these things too seriously. The only time I'd be like, oh, I really didn't like an episode is when the downs really outnumber the ups. You know, when the ups outnumber the downs, we are fine. This episode is, it's grand. In the same way, hey, you know, if you don't like the ups, don't take it too seriously, it's grand. But here's the incredibly serious next up that I have. Paul Wesley returns after a couple of episodes away, and I've got to say, I like him. I really like him. And I like his take on Kirk. Very different, but that's good. Because I know we've made this point before, so I'll be brief, but when you look at Chris Pine's take on Kirk and Paul Wesley's take on Kirk, there's elements of Shatner in there, but if you just wanted Shatner, hire a Shatner lookalike, you know, or hire an impersonator. And they haven't done that. And I appreciate that, because it gives us something more. It gives us a bit more depth for the character. This Kirk, clearly doing well in his career. We find out very quickly that he's just been made first officer of the Farragut, which is why he's in this episode. And then, you know, we find out he's got beef with his brother, which I'll come back to, and things like that, which is great. And then he plays it as he's not a perfect character. And he does make a couple of mistakes along the way, as humans do. And I will say, logical down, why does the first officer of the Farragut spend the entire episode on the Enterprise and no other member of crew does? If Pike is the fleet captain who's in command of both vessels, I can understand there not being a captain, but then shouldn't the first officer be running the ship? Just me, looking too much into it? Logic of the situation aside, Kirk ends up in the mess hall where he interacts with Uhura, and also before that we do see Kirk and Sam. If you think about it, we've never seen Kirk and Sam interacting before, because by the time in the original series episode Operation Annihilate, Sam unfortunately was already dead by the time Kirk got to the planet. It's very sad. In the 2009 movie, there was a scene with Sam Kirk filmed. It was cut, so we do get a random boy on the side of the road, but there's no dialogue. So this is the first actual scene of interaction between Sam and James T. Kirk. Now, there will be those who will argue that we did see Sam and Jim interact before, but that was in A Quality of Mercy, which was the season finale of season 1, which was actually an imagined what-if scenario. So this is the first time that we've seen them interact together in the Prime universe. So just to let you know, I didn't forget about that, and that was just as seamless as this inclusion, and what t-shirt change. And I am so here for it, because they really are at each other's throats from the beginning. Like, you get the sibling feeling off them. They're both standoffish, but they do like each other, but they annoy each other, and there's the silly arguments that only siblings have, which I really, really dug. You know, there's the kind of gentle ribbing, before it becomes a little less gentle, of each other's careers. Kirk, they're both Kirk. James is not a massive fan of Sam's career path, but equally, Sam is a bit miffed that James has just become first officer as the Farragut. Now, he's both like, oh, well done, but then also like, right, you know, this is going to make me look really bad in front of Dad. Not like James took a promotion to annoy Sam, but they speak about the importance of living up to their father's legacy. Their father, who in this reality is still alive, because they talk about, you know, James is now the youngest first officer, not only serving currently in the fleet, but also in the history of Starfleet. The previous youngest first officer in Starfleet history was George Kirk Sr. of, I'm a bit too excited, I have to reveal it now, of the USS Kelvin, taken up. Yes, that is something I probably should have waited for citation observations for, but remember how, frankly, annoyed I was that we didn't get a good Kelvin shout out before? Boom, we got it here, so thank you very much, Strange New Worlds. I appreciate this. It looks for a little while like the two brothers are not going to be the best of friends, and, I mean, I suppose, like that, we can all argue with our siblings, but we all try and get along. I say we all, sweeping statement there, but yeah, they're not the closest buddies in the world at this point. So that sets us up for Kirk meeting Uhura in the bar, and Uhura is just like, I just don't want to be hit on right now. And I thought, oh, that's, right, she's got the measure of Kirk pretty quickly. But actually, no, she's joking. Oh, I love it. She goes, oh, you're Sam's brother. And he goes, oh, you're friends with Sam. And she says, look, I don't want to be hit on right now. And he goes, oh, you're friends with Sam. Up. Elsewhere, we discover that someone is sabotaging the refinery, while Uhura is still hearing these sounds and sort of seeing things that may or may not be there. She's been ordered on bed rest by Captain Pike, but you know, she's not being able to sleep because she keeps coming back to the memory of the shuttle crash that killed her family. It's quite traumatic. So when the culprit of the sabotage over on the refinery, there's a lot of funny, which I will get to properly in a moment, there's a lot of funny back and forth between Una and Pelia over on the refinery, but they discover this Lieutenant Ramon, who was stationed to the refinery, who is definitely suffering some sort of episode. He's not well. They bring him to the Enterprise's sickbay, and they realize pretty quickly he's got a lot of the same symptoms that Uhura seems to be showing. And it's caused him to sabotage the refinery. Now, as of yet, they don't know the correlation. They don't know why or what's going on or what's causing any of this. But Uhura is a little understandably freaked out. While attempting to ascertain what's actually going on with Ramon, Ramon seems to snap. He grabs a medical instrument and he just slashes forward. And I thought for a terrifying moment, I thought he had just cut Mbenga's neck. He didn't though. He got him across the chest and he ripped Mbenga's shirt. And, you know, he gets out of there, he runs out of sickbay, and Mbenga's like, look, I'm all right. You know, go and chase him. We need to get him back here. Earlier, Uhura unfortunately had an episode just after meeting Kirk for the first time, wherein she saw a hallucination of so many dead crewmen in the hallway, and then herself, who was attacking her, and she fought back and ended up breaking poor James's nose. It led to a bit of a logical question I have here. So Uhura breaks James's nose, and James says, look, Rather than go to sickbay and you get written up for striking a superior officer, will we deal with this off the books? My logical question is, would she have to be written up, or is it not the individual's choice? Like, if James said, "Nah, it's grand. I don't want to report this." I just don't know the answer. So that one was just, it seems like almost a threat. But yeah, it comes across well. They open up to each other a little bit in Uhura's quarters to begin with, and then James goes off to get her a cookie. And he really goes on about this cookie, and it really made me want a cookie. Uhura realizes something and goes out to meet James in the hallway, which sets up the scene in the sickbay. She does say she doesn't want that damn cookie, though. Uhura, we are not the same people. Ramon is brought in, the attack happens, they're walking through the hallways, and Kirk is there and he's got his phaser out, and Uhura's there, and Uhura has a moment where again she hallucinates, and she's back, suddenly the walls are coming in, but she's back, and Kirk goes, "Hey, you're here, this is real, it's okay." And he's like, "We gotta get you back to sickbay," and she says, "No, it's okay, you go on alone, I'll go back on my own, down." Splitting up, really? Someone's out there and they've got a weapon and they don't seem to care who they use it on, and you're gonna split up. Absolutely shockingly, Uhura walks around a corner and sees blood on the ground, and then goes up and there's a whole thing in the nacelle. Before we find Ramon, sorry, I'm still just like, why would you split up in what is clearly the beginnings of a horror movie? Before we find there, Kirk is walking through the corridor, so is La'an, and we get that interaction between them both. Oh, I mean, your heart just breaks, because the thing, and tomorrow, and La'an and Kirk, and the kissing, and then the suddenly dead Kirk, and then it's all, I'm sorry, it's still very fresh for me, okay? I really liked that episode. So seeing this exchange here, it's very simple. They don't linger too much because only La'an knows the real, the heavy truth of it. And it's just a nice combination with the other couple of scenes that we get them as well. I like how they handle it. That's an up to me, how they handle La'an and Kirk in this episode. But okay, back to the pylon. So the access tunnel for the pylon, which I love those old access tunnels, Uhura goes up and there she is in the pylon control room, and she sees Ramon. She does her very best to convince Ramon that his dreams are not reality, that whatever he's saying is not actually what's happening around him. And she does that by relating stories from her own life, how the fact that she was born in Kenya, the fact that her parents and brother were lost in a shuttle accident, that her earliest memory is of her dad playing the piano, things like this. And for a moment, it looks like it's working, but it doesn't. And Ramon lunges at her and tries to attack. She is absolutely proficient enough that she is able to more than ward off his attack. You know, looks, she's definitely got the upper hand. Alas, he's got access to basically the explosive that's going to take half the room apart. Kirk does catch up. He grabs her and orders a site-to-site transport. Thank you for remembering you have this technology. They beam out of there and Ramon is blown out into space after he detonates part of the nacelle room. It's actually quite a brutal scene. And even though Ramon is the aggressor here, you can't help feeling for him at this moment, especially when you see his body freezing out in space as well. That and the knowledge that he killed another officer while in this mania, this hallucinogenic state. It's grim, it's brutal, and as bad as it sounds, I really liked it. I thought it was handled really, really well, because it also sets up the fear in Uhura that this will happen to her because she is experiencing the same symptoms that he did. Pike is able to reassure her ever so slightly by saying that because Ramon is now deceased, Starfleet's given him permission to open up the medical files and personal logs, and while going through these with Kirk again, really nice to see the two of them just working together so much. Basically, they start to worry that crap, like, this is what Uhura is going through. This is not looking good for her. What comes back in at this point is those recordings of Hemmer. because while she's watching one in a way to, I suppose, calm herself, Uhura stumbles on something he says like, careful, careful, or the receiver will get fried. And it is like a light bulb goes on over her head when she realizes that she's not hallucinating, she is misinterpreting a communication from another being, from another species. She brings this information to Kirk, he brings that information to Sam Kirk, who is more of a xenoanthropologist, biologist, scientist than either of them, and he is able to postulate that yes, there are theories of other dimensional beings poking through into this dimension, but not being fully formed beings. They just they grab onto what they can and they communicate how they can. And what they come up with is that the deuterium in this nebula that they've been mining and collecting, full circle, are these aliens. And are these aliens home? And they have been completely accidentally torturing and killing them. These are the images that Uhura had beamed into her head of the dead Hemmer, of the dead officers in the hallway, of the walls closing in on top of her, losing her living space, and of course fighting herself. There's their way of sending the picture of you are the aggressor, you are the one hurting us. Uhura is sure enough that she brings this to Pike, and Pike, and I appreciate this so much, there's no faffing about. Pike's like, how certain? She's like, I'm 100% certain. He's like, right, evacuate that refinery, everyone get off, fire torpedoes. Bingo, bango, boom, nice fantastic explosion there, looks great. And Pike just says, look, if we get any heat for this, that's on me. Because Uhura is able to see, there's, zombie Hemmer was standing beside Pike, of course only Uhura can see him for this whole thing. After they destroy the refinery, Hemmer is revealed in all of his kind of pale blue, white-skinned glory in his red shirt, and it's just great to see him again, really. Not enough of him, but great to see him again. And that sort of brings the episode toward its climax. We get one last brilliant scene between Kirk and Uhura, where they're sharing a drink in the mess hall. Sam Kirk comes over and he's like, look, I just want to say, proud of you, Jim, well done on the promotion. And Jim's like, thanks. And Sam's like, are you seriously not going to apologize? And Sam's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And Sam just goes, well, you can enjoy your little ship, the Farragut. Meanwhile, I'm over here on the flagship. Up. Absolute up. Loved it. We also get, toward the end, a very lovely, sweet scene between Pelia and Una, where we get a little bit of Una's backstory. Pelia used to be a professor of Una's at the academy. She gave Una a C at one point. Una then was so, she was annoyed because she meticulously studied for the paper, and she's all about order and control, and Pelia's a little chaotic, and Pelia's like, yeah, that's not what this is about. You've got a problem with me because I remind you of Hemmer. And it's just a nice moment, again, of just humanity. Pelia just delivering humanity again. I suppose, somewhat ironically, her being a Lanthanite, but I just liked that little exchange. It was just enough, it wasn't even a B plot really in the episode, but it was just enough to be like, here's a little bit more depth to both these characters. The last scene of the episode is the introduction between, and handshake between, of Kirk and Spock. And I mean, if fans, we didn't cheer throughout the galaxy, I mean, sure, listen, what are we about? Now, will you take a walk with me to Cetacean Observations? The very first one I want to go to is the name of the nebula itself. It's called the Bannon Nebula, and there's a very special reason for that name. Actress Melissa Navia, who of course we know as Ortegas, was married to Brian Bannon, who passed away from cancer in 2021. This is a beautiful way of making a tribute to him, because this nebula is described as one of those ones that's the building blocks of stars. So from this nebula comes the chance for some sort of eternal life, and I thought that was so lovely, certainly an up from me. Now, we have references to deuterium, which of course is used as fuel through Starfleet vessels. We get a name drop of Chief Kyle, even though, unfortunately, as we know, he hasn't appeared in this season. Nice to hear his name. Now, we get the explanation of Pike's Pike's promotion to fleet captain. Now again, if we go back to the menagerie, we know that Pike was fleet captain at the time of his accident. So the episode, it's quite funny. It takes great pains to go like, yeah, it's temporary. It's temporary. He'll be back down to captain like next week. And I like that. That was good. We get a recording of Hemmer, so which means, of course, we get to see Hemmer back again. We get the first canonical, or the first on-screen meeting of Sam and James T. Kirk. They're drinking scotch, and then absolutely brilliant. I've already brought it up, but yes, the confirmation that George Kirk was the first officer of the USS Kelvin. We see Una and Spock playing 3D chess, and we see Uhura ordering some Saurian brandy. We then see the first canonical meeting of Kirk and Uhura, which is so cool. I just really like them together. When Uhura is in Pike's ready room, Kirk enters, and there is what seems to be a deliberate, like, this is good. This is for the cannon chasers, right? So Kirk walks in, and one of the first things he says is, congratulations on your promotion to fleet captain. Now, why is that important? Because if we go back all the way to the menagerie, Kirk says, I only met him after he had been promoted to fleet captain. They never said for how long. Well played. That's an up. I did think it was quite funny, actually, that Mbenga's shirt was ripped, but Kirk's wasn't. Alternate universe. They say Ramon is in astrometrics, which of course we will immediately think of Star Trek Voyager for that one. When Pike orders the evacuation of the refinery, we see the Farragut, which of course we knew was coming because that had been mentioned earlier. We also see that little Archer class shit, the USS Archer. It's just there. It's a bit blinking, you'll miss it. But so far, basically, Starfleet has like 3 ships that are workable, because the Peregrine class, that's sort of not workable. We got the Constitution, we got the Farragut, and we got the Archer, and of course remember that one they called a Crossfield class, that was a kit bash. So yeah, okay, nice to see them being brought out again. Easter egg or no, the refinery really reminded me of the Sonar Collector from Star Trek Insurrection. Then of course, Easter egg or no, we get the fact that Kirk and Spock are now friends. This is one I've left till the end because I think it just sort of encapsulates the episode as a whole. Uhura and Kirk, their friendship in this episode, particularly that scene in Uhura's quarters where they're talking about having to face death, is my Latinum up of the week. And not because I want to end on a conversation about death, but because I wanted to get the whole episode in. Because this episode is all about facing death, and how that can sometimes be a way to face life as well. I really liked this episode. I think this season so far has been doing so well and so well and so well. And I can only hope that episode 7 is as good. You know, that episode that's called Those Old Scientists. Folks, thank you so much for watching along, very much appreciated. Remember, you'll be able to get a sort of a deeper dive of this episode with our thoughts when it comes to our podcast, which will be dropping next Tuesday, so look out for that. There'll be special guests with that as well, so thank you very much. Remember, you can follow us over on Twitter at TrekCulture, we're on Blue Sky at TrekCulture, we're on Instagram at TrekCultureYT. So if you have any thoughts about this or anything else, you let us know in the comments below or let us know over on socials. I'm of course Sean Ferrick on the various socials too, and don't forget to follow Chris at Chris Edit on both Twitter and Instagram as well. Folks, until I see you again, make sure that you live long and prosper. Make sure you are sharing any of your Star Trek thoughts with the hashtag #SaveStarTrekProdigy. Remember as well, our friends in Ukraine, Slava Ukrainia, you are all wonderful, you are all stunning. Make sure that you have a wonderful week until I see you again. Make it so.